Hi, I'm Stephen Padilla, Director of USBC Coaching. I'm here today with Lou Marquez, USBC Goal Coach and Assistant Coach for Lawrence Tech University. We're here at Bowling IQ. We've got a great facility, Lou. Tell us a little bit about where we are and give us some information about what the building is.
Well, Bowling IQ is a very unique facility. It houses two great businesses inside of it. The Delora Brothers Warehouse and Supplier for all pro shop equipment, proprietary equipment, bowling center equipment for the Midwest and eastern parts of the states, and the Metro Detroit Bowling and Resource Center. That's the educational side of this facility. Here we train bowlers from all facets, from entry level to beginner bowler to advanced seasonal tour player, as well as house our training facility for the Lawrence Tech University bowling team, men's and women's programs. So great facility for anybody who wants to come in and learn anything about bowling.
Great. Glad to have use of this facility. Now, we're going to focus specifically on lane play, though. You and I were talking. We want to do some information, give you some detail about lane play. Some information about what lane transition looks like, maybe how to adapt and adjust to that. So when we get into what lane play and transitions are, what are we kind of looking at when we talk about lane play or lane transition?
Well, lane play is a lot of things to a lot of different people, depending on the level of bowler that we're at. But what it really is, the science of understanding the changes that progress on the lane when we're immersed in this environment. We know as a bowler, whether you're an open play bowler or a league bowler or a tournament bowler, lane play could be just those subtle nuances that we make adjustments with to understanding equipment changes or matching up our physical game to the oil environment or making moves based on pinfall. There's a lot of science that goes on to adapting to this invisible environment. It's the only sport, think about it, that's the only sport where the playing field is totally invisible.
Yeah, there's a lot to it, honestly. We're going to talk about ball motion. We'll talk about some adjustments that the game that players can make. There's going to be plenty of things that when we dig into it that we'll see are opportunities or options for different levels of players to adjust to. So let's get started. Let's talk about lane play and adjustments. Let's get moving and understand a little bit more on how to make your game a little bit stronger. Okay, so we have a variety of player out there. It doesn't matter if you're 3-step, 4-step, whatever type of approach or timing you've got. There's infinite number of ways you can get it done behind the foul line. But what that does is really translates what they do onto the approach, onto the lane. So in getting what they do onto the lane, let's talk briefly about what is out here on the lane and then maybe what the ball transition goes through, maybe the phases of motion. Tell us a little bit about what we're actually standing on and what we could see out here.
Well, in the front section of the lane, where we look at the energy release from the bowler style, this area here kind of controls what happens in what we call the skid phase of the ball's energy. It's that area just beyond the foul line and up to about the areas of the arrows. And what it does, it linearly controls the directional path of the ball.
Okay. So the initial force that a bowler puts into the shot initially comes in contact with the front part of the lane, so that 15-20 foot area is going to be the skid area for ball motion. What happens next?
Well, as the ball travels down the lane and it starts to pick up energy and pick up friction from the ball getting deeper and deeper into contact with the lane environment, that surface underneath has a certain texture, certain friction. So that bowling ball is going to try to unleash that energy. And as it unleashes that energy, it then starts to change direction and starts to get into what we call a hook phase.
Okay, so the hook phase is going to be the mid part of the lane. So with the ball's hydroplaning through the front, we get into a hook phase in the middle part. What happens as it gets toward the pins?
As it starts getting to the pins and the ball starts exiting through the end of that oil line, it then starts to get into a roll phase. And it starts facing itself up and trying to get into the right happy roll so it can start entering to that pin deck and start hopefully getting to the pocket.
So we got skid in the front, we've got hook in the mid lane, then we've got roll in the back part of the lane. All three of those phases of ball motion are pretty important, obviously, to getting the right kind of pin carry. And the bowler's motion, what they do physically on the approach, is going to be affected by those three phases of what happens on the lane, if the bowler's ball gets into those phases or not. So when we talk about the overall transition of what a bowler gives to the ball and the lane, ideally that skid, hook, and roll phase are what we're looking for to get good pin action and get good carry, and ultimately tell the bowler what they need to do.
Absolutely. Their physical games kind of create certain habits or certain environments where they're really comfortable. And depending on where they're interacting with that lane could determine, the overall outcome. Like if you're a speed dominant player, chances are they're going to be playing more right of the ball track or in the ball track. And that's the most worn part of the lane in any bowling center, whether it be synthetic or wood or different types of synthetic, or if they're, let's say, heavy red dominant, like the two-handers nowadays. You see the Belmonte and the Askews kind of revving it up. They tend to be more diagonal across the front part of the lane. So their physical ability really determines what's going to happen during the process of lane play.
It's going to change that environment. It's going to affect how they transition, how they move. So putting those pieces together is really the essence of what we're talking about when we talk about transition and lane play.
Absolutely.
Okay, Lou, Blake's throwing a shot here. Tell us what we're seeing when this ball gets on the lane.
Well, the speed that he creates with his physical game, his energy that he's going to release and his rev rate are going to create that first initial energy release into the lane. We call that the skid phase. So as he gets ready to release this ball, what you'll see is the ball transition straight long through the front part of the lane. You'll see we taped up his bowling ball and you'll see his axis being held tight. And then you'll see the energy of that ball start to release as it gets through the mid lane and then the back end, start to get into its roll phase.
So the axis is going to change position, and then we're going to see each of those phases as the ball goes down the lane, so we'll see the skid hook and roll based on what that axis point looks like.
Yes.
Okay, Lou, so we see what the bowler's just given the lane. They've given a shot to the lane, and it's got energy, and it's got speed, and it's got a lot of factors to it. Now the lane takes over. The lane's going to have a lot of things it's going to do to the ball as it goes through. And let's start in the skid phase. What's happening to the ball and the lane when you get into the skid phase?
Well, in the skid phase, the ball's actually impacting the front part of the lane. That's where it's had its most miles per hour. It's the fastest. Mm-hmm. But as it starts to transition into this lane, it's trying to travel to the heaviest concentration of oil. Right. Big volume of oil, big conditioner. It helps to protect that oil and that bowling ball to cushion it so that it can store up some energy. Now, as it starts to release that energy, it starts to travel then a little bit further down the lane, and the friction in the lane starts to take over. You gotta remember, we're a game of the energy of the bowler, and now the energy of the lane starting to take over. So we're always in this constant battle of back and forth energies. So that's what's happening.
So now we're at the mercy of the lane with the skid phase. And with that phase, like I said, the ball speed's slowing down and the ball's starting to change its directions. We're seeing some depletion of the oil through the front part of the lane. We get to the hook phase now. So now the ball's going to start to do something a little different and the lane's going to change differently. What's happening?
It's starting to flare. That drilling style, that option that you and your pro shop operator had in the idea of how do you want to see this ball move, is starting to really take over. That's where the weight block and all the engineering that goes into it starts gyrating, and the revolutions that you impart and the speed that you impart starting to take over, and it's trying to change the dynamics of that ball as it's traveling. So we start getting further and further down the lane, and you start seeing depletion from the lane oil. Oil starts to get a little thinner as we go, and that starts interacting with how this ball is going to slow down on the lane.
Okay, so it's going to slow down in the hook phase. We're going to see a change of direction for sure. Now we get to the last part of the lane. Now we're looking at the roll phase of ball motion. So what's happening to the ball and the lane there?
Well, the ball is actually now it's at its point where even though it's revving quickly, you see it spinning quickly, it's actually at its slowest part. And what you're looking for is the ball to right itself up. It's actually getting into what we call the happy, spinning gyration, happy roll. But it's rolling now. And we want that happening well before that end of that oil line. If we go beyond it, serious trouble if we go beyond that. Too much energy, too much violent reaction, or maybe not enough. So we want to be in control in that section right before the end of the oil line. And hopefully 10 in the pit is the end result.
That's the idea. Hopefully we go through all three of those phases of ball motion, and the bowler gets a lot of information from that. If you're used to seeing ball motion and then reacting to what you see, it becomes easier to learn what your adjustments need to be. So ultimately, when you talk about ball motion and what's going on out here, after you've let go of it, that lane's taking it over, so there's going to be a lot of results that you need to observe and watch to make your adjustments down the road.
Yeah, one of the most important things too from a bowler's perspective is that while they're interacting with the lane oil, there's so many other people also interacting with it, and they have a determination of what's going to happen. It's not just them. If a bowler never really moves or adjusts, and we know what the game looks like, it's not necessarily consistent. But if you're interacting with it, as this environment's ever changing, your scores are going to stay maintained pretty well.